A little girl returned a Hells Angels wallet. What she said next changed his life. The rumble of the motorcycle engine died down as Leo eased his chrome-detailed Harley into an empty spot at Memorial Park. The morning sun caught the polished metal, sending bright reflections dancing across the pavement. He swung his leg over the seat, his weathered leather boots meeting the ground with a solid thud. Leo's muscles ached from the long ride, and his joints weren't as forgiving as they used to be. At 45, the road took more of a toll on his body than it had in his younger years. He pulled off his riding gloves, revealing hands covered in faded tattoos, remnants of a wilder life. The park stretched out before him, a peaceful oasis in the middle of the concrete jungle. Young mothers pushed strollers along winding paths, while elderly couples walked hand in hand. A group of kids kicked around a soccer ball on a patch of grass, their laughter carrying on the breeze. Before you continue listening, please let me know where in the world are you watching from today. Now back to the story. Leo lowered himself onto a wooden bench, his leather jacket creaking as he settled in. The familiar weight of chains hanging from his belt loops clinked softly. Despite his intimidating appearance, the full beard, the tattoos snaking up his neck, the well-worn biker gear, there was a gentleness in his eyes as he watched a pair of sparrows hop around near his feet. The morning air carried the sweet scent of blooming dogwood trees. Leo breathed deeply, letting the tension ease from his shoulders. These quiet moments were becoming more precious to him lately. The wild days of his past, the endless parties, the fights, the constant moving from town to town, seemed like another lifetime ago. His calloused fingers absently traced the worn leather of his wallet, running over the faded Hells Angels insignia embossed on its surface. The wallet was as old as his membership had been. 17 years of hard living etched into every scratch and scuff mark. A child's delighted squeal drew his attention to the playground. The sound stirred something deep inside him, a longing he usually kept buried. He'd never allowed himself to think too much about settling down or having a family. The Brotherhood had been his family, or so he'd told himself all these years. But lately the roar of his motorcycle engine wasn't drowning out the silence quite as well as it used to. The open road didn't call to him with the same urgency. More and more often he found himself pulling into parks like this one, watching ordinary people live their ordinary lives, and wondering if he'd made the right choices. Leo stood up, his knees protesting slightly. The morning was getting on, and he had miles to cover before nightfall. That's what he told himself anyway. The truth was, these peaceful moments had a way of making him uncomfortable, forcing him to think about things he'd rather forget. As he stretched his arms above his head, his wallet slipped unnoticed from his jacket pocket, landing softly in the grass beside the bench. The leather crackled as he adjusted his jacket, preparing for the next leg of his journey. Across the park, a small figure in a yellow sundress had spotted him. Her pigtails bounced as she ran, determined little legs carrying her across the grass in his direction. This was Lucy, though Leo didn't know it yet, couldn't know that this moment would change everything. Lucy Andrews had been watching the strange man on the bench for a while now. From her spot near the monkey bars, she'd studied his big motorcycle, shiny and loud, and the way his leather jacket caught the sunlight. He didn't look like the other daddies at the park, with their neat polo shirts and baseball caps. This man looked more like the heroes in her favorite cartoon shows, tough and strong, with tattoos peeking out from under his sleeves. When he stood up to leave, something fell from his pocket. Lucy's eyes widened as she saw the wallet land in the grass. Her kindergarten teacher, Ms. Patterson, always said that finding something that belonged to someone else meant you had to give it back. It was the right thing to do. "Mommy, look!" Lucy tugged at her mother's sleeve, pointing toward the fallen wallet. "That man dropped something." Her mother's face went pale as she looked up, but Lucy was already on the move, her yellow sundress swishing around her knees as she ran across the park. Her white sneakers, decorated with rainbow shoelaces, carried her quickly over the grass. The wallet felt heavy in her small hands as she picked it up. It was made of dark brown leather, worn smooth in places, with interesting patterns pressed into it. Lucy ran her fingers over the rough surface, fascinated by the texture. It reminded her of the leather seats in her uncle's car. She clutched the wallet tightly as she hurried toward the man. He was so tall, taller than any grown-up she'd ever seen up close. Lucy had to crane her neck to look up at him, but she wasn't scared. There was something about his eyes that made her feel safe, even though he looked kind of scary with his big beard and all those chains. "Mister," she called out, slightly out of breath from her run. "Mister, wait." The big man turned around slowly. Lucy held up the wallet with both hands, presenting it like a precious gift. His eyes, a warm shade of brown just like hers, widened in surprise as he patted his empty pocket. "You dropped this," she said, smiling up at him. Her two front teeth were missing, giving her grin a cheerful, gap-toothed charm. The man's rough hands hesitated for a moment before accepting the wallet. He looked down at Lucy with an expression she couldn't quite understand, like he was seeing something that confused him. Lucy rocked back and forth on her heels, clasping her hands behind her back. She studied his face carefully, noting how his beard was the same color as her hair. Her mother had told her about him just last week, showing her an old photograph hidden in a shoebox. Now, standing here, she was absolutely certain. With the simple, direct honesty that only children possess, Lucy looked straight into the man's eyes and said, "Mommy says you're my daddy." Leo stared at the wallet in his hands, his mind struggling to process the little girl's words. A knot formed in his stomach as he tried to laugh it off, but the sound came out strained and uncertain. The child's brown eyes, eerily familiar, gazed up at him with complete conviction. "What did you say, sweetheart?" His voice was gruff but gentle, not wanting to upset her. He'd dealt with confused kids before, usually mixing him up with someone else because of his size. Lucy bounced on her toes, her yellow sundress swaying with the movement. "You're my daddy," she repeated, as casually as if she were telling him the sky was blue. "Mommy has a picture of you in her special box. You look different now because you have more beard, but it's still you." Leo ran a hand through his graying hair, his weathered face creasing with confusion. Kids had wild imaginations. That's all this was. Had to be. But something about her face, the shape of her nose, the way her eyebrows furrowed when she concentrated. It was like looking in a mirror from decades ago. "Listen, kiddo," he said, crouching down to her level despite the protest from his bad knee. "I think there might be a mix-up here. Who's your mommy?" Lucy's face lit up. "Oh, she's right over there." She turned, scanning the park with purpose. "She was watching me on the swings, but now she's walking this way because she saw me running to give you your wallet back." Leo followed her pointing finger, his heart suddenly hammering against his ribs. Through the scattered crowd of park-goers, a woman was approaching them. Her pace was determined but cautious, like someone approaching a wild animal they weren't sure would bolt. The years melted away as recognition hit him like a physical blow. Emma Wells. Her honey-blonde hair was shorter now, cut in a practical bob instead of the long waves he remembered. She wore simple jeans and a blue blouse instead of the vintage dresses she used to favor. But those green eyes, he'd know them anywhere. Their brief romance flashed through his mind, stolen moments in the summer heat, promises whispered in the dark, the way she'd looked at him like he could be more than just another outlaw biker. Then came the morning he'd left town, without a word, running from responsibilities he wasn't ready to face, from the possibility of being something better than what he was. Lucy tugged at his leather jacket, pulling him back to the present. "See? That's my mommy!" Her smile was proud and completely unaware of the weight of the moment. Leo straightened up slowly, his joints creaking in protest. Emma was close enough now that he could see the emotions playing across her face. Surprise, recognition, and something else he couldn't quite read. She looked exactly like she had in his dreams during those lonely nights on the road, the ones where he'd let himself wonder about the life he'd left behind. The distance between them shortened with each step she took, and Leo felt rooted to the spot. 5 years had passed since he'd last seen her, but now, looking at Lucy's familiar brown eyes and Emma's approaching figure, those years collapsed into nothing. The truth of Lucy's words began to sink in, heavy as an anchor dropping into still waters. The park seemed to fall silent around them as Leo took a hesitant step toward Emma. His heart pounded against his leather jacket, and for the first time in years, his imposing frame felt small. Lucy skipped between them, oblivious to the tension crackling in the air. "Emma," he managed, his voice rougher than he intended. The name felt foreign on his tongue after so many years of trying not to think it. Emma's green eyes met his, a storm of emotions swirling in them. She placed a protective hand on Lucy's shoulder, drawing the child close. "Leo," she said quietly. "I didn't expect to see you here." Lucy beamed up at her mother. "Mommy, I found his wallet, just like you always say to do when someone loses something important." A ghost of a smile touched Emma's lips as she smoothed Lucy's dark hair that matched Leo's own. "That was very thoughtful of you, sweetheart." She looked back at Leo, her expression growing serious. Would you like to sit down? I think we need to talk." They moved to a nearby bench, Lucy happily settling between them. The little girl swung her legs, humming to herself while the adults sat in weighted silence. A cool breeze rustled through the trees, carrying the sound of distant children playing and dogs barking. "Is it true?" Leo finally asked, his voice barely above a whisper. "What she said about being—" He couldn't finish the sentence. Emma nodded slowly, her hands clasped tightly in her lap. "Yes," she said. "Lucy is your daughter." The confirmation hit Leo like a physical blow. He leaned back against the bench, trying to steady himself. When... "I found out about 2 weeks after you left," Emma explained, her voice steady but tight with old pain. "I tried to find you, called every contact I had, reached out to people who might know where you'd gone. But you'd vanished completely." Leo remembered those days, riding hard and fast, putting as much distance as he could between himself and the life he thought would trap him. He'd changed his phone number, avoided his old haunts, done everything possible to disappear. "I would have told you if I could," Emma continued, watching Lucy as she reached down to pluck a dandelion from the grass. "But maybe part of me was relieved when I couldn't find you. Your life then, the people you ran with." She shook her head. "I had to think about what was best for her." The weight of those lost years pressed down on Leo's shoulders. 5 years of birthdays, first words, first steps, all gone, scattered like ashes in his wake. He watched Lucy examining the dandelion with intense concentration, seeing himself in the set of her jaw, the shape of her eyes. "She knows about you," Emma said softly. "Not everything, of course, but I've always shown her your picture, told her that her daddy was out there somewhere. I never wanted her to think she wasn't wanted, even if—" She trailed off, leaving the rest unsaid. Lucy looked up at them, holding out her dandelion. "Want to make a wish?" she asked Leo, completely unaware of the magnitude of the moment. Leo stared at the delicate white seed head, remembering how many times he'd wished for a chance to make things right in his life. Now here it was, in the form of a little girl with his eyes, and a woman he'd never truly forgotten. A small bell chimed as they entered Joe's coffee shop, the aroma of fresh coffee and baked goods wrapping around them. Lucy clutched her mother's hand, eyes wide at the display of colorful cookies in the glass case. The cafe was quiet, with only a few patrons scattered among the wooden tables. "Can I have a chocolate milk, Mommy?" Lucy asked, bouncing on her toes. Emma nodded, managing a small smile. "Why don't you sit at that table by the window while I order?" She pointed to a corner spot, far enough from other customers to allow for privacy. Leo stood awkwardly, his large frame seeming out of place among the quaint cafe decor. "Let me get it," he said, reaching for his wallet. "It's fine," Emma replied quickly, perhaps too quickly. "Just watch Lucy for a moment." He nodded, following Lucy to the table while Emma went to order. The little girl climbed onto a chair, immediately picking up a paper napkin and starting to fold it into shapes. Leo sat across from her, his leather jacket creaking against the wooden chair. Emma returned with their drinks, 2 coffees and Lucy's chocolate milk. She'd also brought a chocolate chip cookie, which made Lucy beam with delight. "Thank you, Mommy." Lucy broke the cookie in half, offering a piece to Leo. "Do you want some?" Leo's throat tightened as he accepted the offering. "Thanks, kiddo." Emma waited until Lucy was occupied with her treat before speaking. "I tried everything to find you," she said softly, stirring her coffee without drinking it. "Called every number I had, drove to all the places you used to hang out. Nobody would tell me anything." Leo's fingers tightened around his cup. "The crew, they had a code. No contact with outsiders when someone decides to split." "I was pregnant, Leo." Emma's voice carried years of hurt. "I wasn't just some outsider looking for trouble. I was carrying your child." Lucy hummed to herself, drawing patterns in the condensation on her glass, oblivious to the tension between the adults. "When I finally accepted that I couldn't find you," Emma continued, "I had to make some hard choices. I couldn't risk Lucy getting mixed up in that life. The gangs, the fights, the constant running." She shook her head. "She deserved better than that." Leo watched Lucy, seeing how carefully she lined up the crumbs from her cookie into a neat row. "You did right by her," he said gruffly. She's perfect." "She is," Emma agreed. "But she's also asked about you. Every birthday, every Father's Day at school. I've tried to protect her, but I couldn't lie. I kept that old photo of you, the one from the summer fair. She knows your face, your name." The weight of those missed moments pressed down on Leo's shoulders. Each birthday, each milestone he'd missed, felt like stones piling up, threatening to crush him. He thought about his life now. The small apartment above the motorcycle repair shop, the solitary meals, the quiet nights. It was a far cry from his wild past. But was it enough? Could he be the father Lucy deserved? Lucy looked up from her artwork of crumbs, fixing him with those familiar eyes. His eyes. "Do you fix motorcycles?" she asked suddenly. "Mommy said you know all about them." "I do," he replied, his voice rough with emotion. "Can you teach me about them someday?" The simple question carried so much hope, so much innocent trust, that it made his chest ache. He looked at Emma, seeking permission he wasn't sure he deserved. Leo's boots scraped against the worn wooden steps as he climbed to his apartment above Jerry's motorcycle repair shop. The familiar smell of motor oil and grease followed him up. But tonight it felt different somehow. Empty. He unlocked the door and stepped into his small home. One room held everything he owned. A twin bed pushed against the wall, a scratched coffee table, and a tiny kitchenette with a hot plate. The bathroom was barely big enough to turn around in, but it had been enough. Until now. Shrugging off his leather jacket, he hung it on the hook by the door and walked to the bathroom sink. The mirror above it was spotted with age, but his reflection was clear enough. Gray streaked his temples now, and lines marked the corners of his eyes. The face of a man who had lived hard and fast, who had run from everything that mattered. "Daddy." The word echoed in his mind, in Lucy's sweet voice. He gripped the edge of the sink, his knuckles turning white. How many times had she said that word to an empty space where he should have been? How many times had Emma had to explain his absence? His gaze drifted to the tattoos that covered his arms, remnants of his past life. Dragons and skulls, symbols of the brotherhood he'd left behind. But there, on his right forearm, was the one that made his chest tight. A small heart with wings, done on a whim the summer he'd met Emma. She'd laughed when she saw it, called him a softy beneath all that leather and attitude. Leo walked to the window, looking out at the city lights. The street below was quiet, just a few cars passing now and then. His life had become as simple as this view, predictable, controlled, safe. But now memories of Emma flooded back, her smile in the summer sun, the way she'd roll her eyes at his bad jokes, how she'd believed he could be more than just another outlaw biker. And Lucy. God, Lucy. She had his eyes, his stubborn chin. But she had Emma's spirit, that fearless way of walking up to a stranger, even one as intimidating as him, and doing the right thing, returning a wallet, speaking the truth that had been hidden for so long. On his coffee table, his phone sat silent. Emma's number was there, written on a small piece of paper she'd pressed into his hand at the cafe. "In case you want to be part of her life?" she'd said, her voice careful, guarded. "But Leo, don't make promises you can't keep. She's had enough disappointment." He picked up the phone, his thumb hovering over the keypad. What would he even say? "Sorry I missed 5 years of our daughter's life. Sorry I ran when things got tough. Sorry I wasn't the man you thought I could be." The numbers stared back at him, accusing in their simplicity. Just 10 digits stood between him and a chance at something real, something that mattered. But the weight of those missing years, the silence that stretched between then and now, made his finger freeze above the keys. Leo set the phone down, the clatter of plastic on wood echoing in his empty apartment. He grabbed his jacket and headed for the door. The night air would clear his head, maybe somewhere in the darkness, in the quiet streets of the city. He'd find the courage to bridge the gap he'd created, to become the father Lucy deserved. The morning sun cast long shadows across the apartment complex as Leo stood at the bottom of the stairs, his heart pounding. He'd found Emma's address in the phone book, and now here he was, staring up at building 23B. The place was modest but well kept, with flower boxes hanging from several windows and children's bikes chained to the railings. Leo climbed the steps slowly, his boots heavy on each tread. Through an open window somewhere, he could hear cartoons playing and children laughing. The sound made his chest tight. How many Saturday mornings had he missed? How many of Lucy's laughs had gone unheard? At Emma's door, he hesitated. The brass numbers, 204, stared back at him accusingly. Before he could change his mind, he knocked, the sound echoing in the quiet hallway. Footsteps approached from inside. The door opened, and Emma stood there in jeans and a faded t-shirt, her brown hair pulled back in a messy ponytail. Her eyes widened with surprise. "Leo?" She glanced past him, as if expecting someone else. "What are you doing here?" He cleared his throat, suddenly aware of how unprepared he was. "I needed to talk, about Lucy, about everything." Emma's expression softened slightly, but wariness remained in her eyes. She looked over her shoulder. Lucy's at her friend's house for a playdate. That's okay. Maybe it's better if we talk first. After a moment's hesitation, Emma stepped back, opening the door wider. Come in. The apartment was small but homey. Crayon drawings covered the refrigerator, and a stack of children's books sat on the coffee table. Lucy's presence was everywhere, in the tiny pink sneakers by the door, in the stuffed animals lined up on the windowsill. Would you like some coffee? Emma asked, moving towards the kitchen. Yeah, thanks. While Emma busied herself with the coffee maker, Leo stood awkwardly in the living room. A photo album lay open on the couch, showing pictures of Lucy as a baby. His throat tightened. Emma returned with 2 mugs, handing one to Leo. They sat down, the coffee table between them like a barrier. I'm sorry, Leo said, the words coming out rough. I'm sorry I wasn't here, for both of you. Emma wrapped her hands around her mug. I tried to find you, when I found out I was pregnant, but you'd already left town, and no one knew where you'd gone. I was running, Leo admitted, from the club, from myself, from everything that mattered. It wasn't easy, Emma said quietly. Raising her alone, working 2 jobs sometimes, trying to explain why her daddy wasn't around. Leo's grip tightened on his mug. What did you tell her? The truth. That I didn't know where you were, but that somewhere out there, you were her father. Emma's voice cracked slightly. She never stopped asking about you, even made up stories about where you might be. The weight of those lost years pressed down on Leo's shoulders. I want to be here now, he said. I know I don't deserve it, and I know it won't be easy. But I want to try. To be her father. Emma studied him for a long moment. She needs stability, Leo. Not someone who's going to disappear again when things get tough. I know. Leo met her gaze steadily. I'm not that person anymore. I want to do right by her. By both of you. It won't be simple, Emma warned. There's a lot of hurt to work through. A lot of trust to rebuild. Leo stood at the zoo entrance, shifting his weight from one foot to the other. He'd traded his usual leather jacket for a plain blue t-shirt, trying to look less intimidating. Lucy bounced beside him, her small hand wrapped trustingly in his, as Emma watched from a few feet away. Can we see the elephants first? Lucy tugged at his hand, her eyes bright with excitement. They're my favorite. Sure, kiddo. Leo's voice came out gruff, but Lucy didn't seem to notice. She just beamed up at him, revealing a missing front tooth. Emma stepped forward, handing Lucy a small backpack with snacks and water. Remember what we talked about, sweetie. Stay close to your father. Father. The word still felt foreign to Leo, like a shirt that didn't quite fit. But Lucy's eager grip on his hand made him stand a little straighter. They made their way down the winding path, following the colorful signs toward the elephant enclosure. Lucy skipped beside him, chattering about her favorite animals, and the time her friend Sarah saw a lion yawn. Did you know elephants never forget? Lucy informed him seriously as they approached the massive gray creatures. That's what Ms. Johnson says. She's my teacher. Is that right? Leo found himself smiling, despite his nervousness. What else does Ms. Johnson teach you? Lucy launched into a detailed explanation about elephants' trunks and how they use them like giant straws to drink water. Her enthusiasm was infectious, and Leo found himself genuinely interested in these facts he'd never cared about before. At the penguin exhibit, Lucy pressed her face against the glass, giggling as the birds waddled past. Look, Daddy, they're wearing tiny tuxedos. The word Daddy caught him off guard, sending a warm feeling through his chest. He knelt beside her, pointing out a baby penguin following its mother. See that little one? Reminds me of you, always following your mom around. Lucy giggled. But I don't waddle. They stopped for lunch at a picnic area, sharing sandwiches Emma had packed. Lucy insisted on giving half her cookie to Leo, explaining very seriously that sharing was caring. The simple gesture touched him more than he expected. As they walked through the butterfly garden, Lucy's eyes grew wide with wonder. Colorful wings fluttered around them like living confetti. A blue monarch landed on Lucy's shoulder, and she stood perfectly still, hardly breathing. "Don't move," Leo whispered, watching her face light up with joy. The butterfly stayed for a moment before floating away, leaving Lucy beaming with delight. "Did you see that, Daddy? It picked me." "Sure did, sweetheart." The endearment slipped out naturally, surprising him. They visited the giraffes, the lions, and the monkeys. At each exhibit, Lucy shared another fact or made up silly stories about the animals. Her imagination seemed endless, and Leo found himself drawn into her world of wonder. By late afternoon, Lucy's energy began to fade. She walked slower, still holding Leo's hand, but leaning against his side. When they passed a bench near the sea lion pool, she climbed up and patted the space beside her. "Can we rest for a minute?" Leo sat down, and Lucy immediately snuggled against his arm, her eyes heavy but still watching the sea lions play. A feeling of protectiveness washed over him as he looked down at her trusting face, her smile peaceful and content. In that moment, watching his daughter's simple happiness, Leo felt something shift inside him. The tough exterior he'd built over years of hard living seemed to crack just a little more, making room for something new, something better. Leo sat at his kitchen table, staring at his phone. 3 missed calls from Tank, his old sergeant-at-arms from the Hells Angels. He'd been dodging them for days, but now they were getting persistent. His coffee had gone cold, forgotten as memories of his past life swirled in his mind. The phone buzzed again, making him jump. Tank's name flashed on the screen. With a heavy sigh, Leo picked up. "Yeah?" Well, the prodigal son finally answers. Tank's gravelly voice filled his ear. "We've been trying to reach you, brother." "I've been busy." Leo's jaw tightened at the familiar nickname. "Too busy for family?" Tank's tone hardened. "The club needs you, Big Tex. We've got business that requires your special touch." Leo's stomach churned. He knew exactly what kind of business Tank meant. "I'm out of that life," he said firmly. "Nobody's ever really out, brother. You know that." Tank chuckled, but there was no warmth in it. "Remember who took care of you when nobody else would? Who had your back in every fight?" Images flashed through Leo's mind. Late nights on the road, the roar of motorcycles, the rush of adrenaline. But now they were overlaid with Lucy's smile, her small hand in his at the zoo. "Things are different now," Leo said, running a hand through his graying hair. "Different?" Tank spat the word. "What, you think you're better than us now? Playing daddy to some kid?" Leo's fingers tightened around the phone. "Watch it, Tank. The club's meeting tonight at the old spot. Be there, or we'll come find you." The threat in Tank's voice was clear. "Family doesn't abandon family, Big Tex." The line went dead. Leo stared at the phone, feeling the weight of his past pressing down on him. The old spot. He knew it well. An abandoned warehouse where they'd planned jobs, celebrated victories, patched up wounds. His leather cut still hung in the back of his closet, the patches and pins telling stories of a life lived on the edge. Some days, he missed the freedom of the open road, the brotherhood that had been his only family for so long. But now, looking at the crayon drawing Lucy had given him, a stick figure with a big smile labeled Daddy, he knew he couldn't go back. Leo grabbed his jacket and keys. The drive to the warehouse was automatic, muscle memory guiding him through familiar streets. The rumble of motorcycles grew louder as he approached. Tank stood waiting outside, arms crossed over his massive chest. Behind him, several other members lounged against their bikes, watching. "You came," Tank grinned, spreading his arms. "Welcome home, brother." Leo stayed by his car. "I came to tell you in person. I'm done, Tank. For good this time." The grin fell from Tank's face. "You don't mean that." "I do." Leo stood straighter, meeting Tank's glare. "I've got a daughter now. She needs me more than the club does." "A daughter?" Tank laughed harshly. "Since when did Big Tex become such a family man?" "Since I realized there's more to life than this." Leo gestured at the warehouse, the bikes, the men watching with narrowed eyes. "I appreciate what the club did for me, but I'm out." Tank stepped closer, his voice low and dangerous. "Nobody walks away, Tex. Nobody." "I am." Leo turned back to his car, every muscle tense. "Don't come looking for me again." He could feel their eyes on him as he drove away, the temptation to look back almost overwhelming. The life he'd known, the only family he'd had for years, was behind him now. But as the warehouse disappeared in his rearview mirror, Leo knew the pull of that life would always be there, like a shadow he couldn't quite shake. Leo stood on Emma's doorstep, shifting his weight from foot to foot. The small bouquet of daisies felt awkward in his calloused hands. He'd spent 20 minutes at the flower shop, trying to pick something that said, "I'm sorry," without seeming too forward. Emma opened the door, surprise flickering across her face. "Leo, we weren't expecting you until tomorrow." "I know." He cleared his throat. "Can we talk?" She hesitated, then stepped aside to let him in. The apartment was small but warm, filled with Lucy's artwork and family photos. A life he could have been part of. "These are for you," he said, holding out the flowers. "And I wanted to say, I'm sorry, Emma, for everything." Emma took the daisies, her expression softening. "You didn't have to bring flowers." "Yes, I did." Leo sat down on the couch, his large frame making the furniture seem smaller. "I've been thinking about all the time I missed. All the birthdays, first steps, first words. I should have been here." "You're here now," Emma said quietly, sitting across from him. "That counts for something." From down the hall came the pitter-patter of small feet. Lucy appeared in her pajamas, clutching a stuffed elephant. "Daddy!" She ran to him, climbing onto his lap without hesitation. The trust in her eyes made his heart ache. "Hey, princess." He smoothed her hair, still amazed at how natural it felt. "Shouldn't you be in bed?" "Can you read me a story?" Lucy held up her elephant. "Mr. Trunks wants to hear one too." Leo looked at Emma, who nodded with a small smile. "One story," she said. "Then bed." In Lucy's room, surrounded by pink walls and twinkling fairy lights, Leo read "Goodnight Moon," while his daughter snuggled against him. Her warmth and complete trust made his throat tight. After Lucy fell asleep, he found Emma in the kitchen, arranging the daisies in a vase. "Thank you," he said, "for letting me be part of her life. She needs her father, Leo." Emma turned to face him. "Just don't disappear again. She wouldn't understand." "I won't." The promise felt solid, real. "I'm done with that life." They talked for another hour, catching up on lost time. Emma told him about Lucy's first words, her love of elephants, her habit of singing made-up songs. Leo shared stories of his own childhood, things he'd never told anyone. His phone buzzed in his pocket, but he ignored it. This moment felt too important to interrupt. When he finally left, the night air felt clearer somehow. He checked his phone and froze. 5 missed calls from Snake, the gang's leader. As if on cue, the phone rang again. Snake's number. "Yeah?" Leo answered, his voice tight. "Getting domestic on us, Big Tex?" Snake's voice dripped with mockery. "Tank tells me you're playing house with some broad and her kid." "My kid," Leo corrected, anger rising. "And it's none of your business." "Everything you do is my business." Snake's tone turned cold. "You took an oath, brother. Blood in, blood out. Remember?" "That was a lifetime ago." "Was it?" Snake laughed. "You've got 1 week to come to your senses. After that..." The threat hung in the air. "Well, it'd be a shame if anything happened to your new little family." The line went dead. Leo stood in the dark, staring at his phone. The warmth of the evening with Emma and Lucy drained away, replaced by a cold knot of fear. His past and future were colliding, and he had no idea how to keep both worlds from exploding. Leo's hands trembled as he worked on his motorcycle in the small garage behind his apartment. Dark circles shadowed his eyes from nights of little sleep. Every time his phone buzzed, his stomach tightened. Snake's men had been relentless, showing up at his usual spots, leaving threatening messages. The sound of a car pulling up made him tense. He grabbed a wrench, ready for trouble, but relaxed when he saw Emma's familiar sedan. "You look terrible," she said, walking into the garage. Her eyes took in his disheveled appearance, the scattered tools, the half-empty coffee cups. "Thanks." He tried to smile, but it came out more like a grimace. "Just been busy with work." Emma picked up a bent photograph from his workbench. It showed his old gang, their leather vests gleaming in the sun. "These are the ones causing trouble, aren't they?" Leo wiped his hands on a rag, buying time before answering. "They've been persistent. I saw them." Emma's voice was quiet but firm. "Outside Lucy's school yesterday, just sitting there on their bikes, watching." The wrench clattered as Leo dropped it. "What? Why didn't you tell me?" "Because you already look like you're carrying the weight of the world." She moved closer, concern etched on her face. "Leo, what's really going on?" He slumped onto a wooden stool, suddenly exhausted. "They want me back. Snake, the leader, he doesn't take no for an answer." "And?" Emma prompted. "And they're making sure I know it. Following me, leaving messages. Snake keeps talking about the oath I took." Leo ran a hand through his hair. "Blood in, blood out. That's what we used to say." Emma leaned against the workbench, arms crossed. "What does that mean?" "It means once you're in for life." The words tasted bitter in his mouth. Or at least, that's what they believe. "And what do you believe?" Leo looked at the photograph again, at his younger self standing proud with his brothers. "I believed it once. Now..." He shook his head. "Now all I can think about is Lucy's smile when she sees me, how it feels to read her bedtime stories." "Then you need to make a choice," Emma said softly. "Really make it, Leo. Not just say the words." "I have made my choice," he protested. "Have you?" Emma's eyes were gentle but firm. "Because right now you're trying to live in both worlds, and it's tearing you apart. More importantly, it's putting Lucy at risk." The truth of her words hit him hard. He'd been trying to handle things quietly, hoping the gang would eventually give up. But Snake's men outside Lucy's school, that crossed a line. "If you want to be part of Lucy's life," Emma continued, "really be her father, you need to decide. No more middle ground, no more trying to manage both sides." Leo stood up, pacing the small space. "If I cut ties completely, they might..." "They might what?" Emma interrupted. "Hurt you? Hurt us? They're already threatening to do that, Leo. The only difference is right now they think they still have a chance of pulling you back in. She was right. Of course she was right. He'd been fooling himself, thinking he could slowly distance himself from his old life while building a new one. I don't want to put you and Lucy in danger, he said finally. We're already in danger, Emma replied. The question is, what are you going to do about it? Leo's morning started like any other. He grabbed his mail from the rusty box outside his apartment, flipping through bills and junk without much interest. Then he saw it, a plain white envelope with no return address, just his name scrawled in familiar handwriting. His stomach dropped. He knew that writing. Snake had taught all of them that distinctive style, a mix of jagged letters that looked like they'd been carved rather than written. Inside his apartment, Leo's hands shook as he tore open the envelope. A single piece of paper fell out, along with a small photograph. His heart stopped when he saw the image, Lucy at her school playground, her bright smile captured mid-laugh as she went down the slide. On the back was yesterday's date. The letter was brief, but its message hit like a sledgehammer. Blood in, blood out, brother. You know the rules. Your little girl's got your smile. Be a shame if anything happened to it. Tomorrow night. The old warehouse. Come alone or someone gets hurt. Leo crumpled the paper in his fist, rage and fear mixing in his chest. The photo of Lucy felt like it was burning a hole in his hand. They'd crossed a line, and there was no going back now. He called Emma immediately. We need to talk. Now. 20 minutes later, they sat at his kitchen table, the letter and photo between them. Emma's face had gone pale, her fingers tracing the edges of Lucy's picture. They're watching her, Emma whispered, her voice tight with fear. At her school. Leo paced the small kitchen, his boots heavy on the linoleum. I won't let them hurt her. I won't let them anywhere near her. What are you going to do? He stopped pacing, bracing his hands on the counter. I'm going to end this. Tonight. Leo, no. Emma stood up, alarm clear in her voice. You can't go there alone. We should call the police. The police can't help with this, Leo cut her off. Snake's got connections, and if they see cops, they'll just disappear and come back worse than before. He turned to face her. This is between me and them. It always has been. It's not just about you anymore, Emma reminded him. You have a daughter now, a family. That's exactly why I have to do this. Leo's voice softened. I need to make sure they never come near Lucy again, never threaten her or you. Emma searched his face, worry lines creasing her forehead. What are you planning to do? I'm going to talk to Snake. Make him understand that I'm done. Really done this time. Leo didn't mention that talking might involve more than just words. Some things Emma didn't need to know. And if he doesn't understand? Leo met her eyes steadily. Then I'll make him understand. Later that afternoon, Leo knelt down in front of Lucy at Emma's apartment. She was playing with her stuffed animals, oblivious to the tension in the room. Hey, sweetheart, he said, forcing a smile. Daddy's got to go take care of something important. But I'll be back soon, okay? Lucy looked up at him with those innocent eyes that made his heart ache. Promise? Promise, he said, pulling her into a tight hug. Over her shoulder, he met Emma's worried gaze. They both knew promises could be hard to keep. As he walked to his motorcycle, the weight of the letter seemed to drag at his pocket. The old warehouse waited across town, and with it, a confrontation he couldn't avoid any longer. He'd lived by their rules once, blood in, blood out. But now he had something worth fighting for, something worth changing for. The old warehouse loomed against the darkening sky, its broken windows like hollow eyes staring down at Leo. The familiar smell of motor oil and cigarette smoke grew stronger as he approached the entrance. His boots crunched on broken glass, each step echoing in the empty lot. Two men emerged from the shadows, faces he knew well, Hammer and Spike, guys he'd once called brothers. They patted him down roughly, checking for weapons. Leo kept his face neutral, even when they took his phone. "Snake's waiting," Hammer grunted, jerking his head toward the door. Inside, the warehouse was dimly lit by hanging work lights. Motorcycles lined one wall, chrome gleaming dully. The space smelled of leather, gasoline, and stale beer. About 15 men lounged around, some sitting on crates, others leaning against support pillars. All eyes turned to Leo as he walked in. Snake sat in his usual spot, an old leather office chair elevated on a platform of wooden pallets. He hadn't changed much, still lean and dangerous looking, with graying hair pulled back in a tight ponytail. The snake tattoo that gave him his name curled up from his collar, its forked tongue reaching toward his ear. "Well, well," Snake drawled, standing slowly. "The prodigal son returns." Leo stopped in the center of the room, keeping his stance relaxed but ready. "This ends tonight, Snake." "That's not how it works, brother." Snake descended from his makeshift throne, boots thudding on the wooden pallets. "You know the rules. Blood in, blood out. I'm not your brother anymore." Leo's voice carried clearly through the warehouse. "And I'm done with the rules." Snake circled him slowly, like a predator sizing up prey. "You've gone soft, Big Tex, playing daddy to that little girl, living the straight life." He spat the words like they tasted bad. "That ain't you." "You're wrong." Leo turned, keeping Snake in view. "That is me now, the only me that matters." A few of the men shifted uncomfortably. They'd never heard anyone talk to Snake this way. "You think you can just walk away?" Snake's voice hardened. "After everything we've been through, everything we've done together?" "I'm not asking permission." Leo met Snake's gaze steadily. "I'm telling you, I'm out, and you're going to leave my family alone." Snake's laugh was ugly. Or what? Or you'll find out just how much of the old me is still here? Leo's words came out low and dangerous. "The part that knows where all the bodies are buried. The part that remembers every deal, every drop, every name." The warehouse went dead silent. Even Snake's smile faltered slightly. "You threatening me, boy?" "I'm promising you." Leo took a step closer. "Leave us alone, or everything comes out. Every last dirty secret." Snake studied him for a long moment, then his lips curved into a cruel smile. "1 week," he said finally. "1 week to come to your senses and return to the fold. After that?" He shrugged. "Well, accidents happen all the time, don't they? Even to little girls." Leo's fists clenched at his sides, but he kept his voice steady. "We're done here." He turned and walked toward the door, feeling the weight of every stare on his back. No one moved to stop him. Just before he reached the exit, Snake called out, "1 week, Big Tex, then we'll see what kind of man you really are." Leo pushed through the door into the cool night air, his heart pounding. He knew this wasn't over. It was just beginning. Leo paced in his small apartment, his boots wearing a path in the thin carpet. The meeting with Snake kept replaying in his mind. Every shadow made him tense. Every sound outside his window had him reaching for his phone. He'd made his stand, but at what cost? The phone's sharp ring cut through the silence. Emma's name flashed on the screen, and his stomach dropped before he even answered. "Leo!" Emma's voice was tight with panic. "You need to come to Memorial Hospital right now." His throat went dry. "What happened?" "It's Lucy." Emma's voice cracked. "These men at the park, they pushed her off the playground equipment, She hit her head. Leo, she's unconscious. The world tilted sideways. Leo grabbed his keys with shaking hands. I'm on my way. The ride to the hospital was a blur. Traffic lights bled together. Horns blared as he weaved through cars. His mind raced with images of Lucy's bright smile, her small hand in his at the zoo, her innocent voice saying, "Daddy," for the first time. The emergency room was a maze of harsh fluorescent lights and antiseptic smell. He found Emma in the pediatric wing, her face pale and drawn. When she saw him, her eyes filled with tears. "They were watching us," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "Two men in leather jackets. They kept staring at Lucy while she played. I tried to get her to leave, but..." She wrapped her arms around herself. "They said to tell you this was just a warning." Leo's legs felt weak. He sank into a plastic chair, his head in his hands. The guilt crashed over him like a wave. This was his fault. All of it. A doctor approached them, clipboard in hand. "Mrs. Wells, Lucy's CT scan shows a mild concussion. She's regained consciousness, but we'd like to keep her overnight for observation." "Can we see her?" Emma asked. The doctor nodded, leading them to a small room. Lucy lay in a bed that seemed too big for her tiny frame. A bandage wrapped around her forehead, and monitoring wires snaked from beneath her hospital gown. Her usual energy was gone, replaced by a stillness that made Leo's heart ache. "Daddy?" Lucy's voice was small and tired. Her eyes fluttered open, focusing on him with effort. Leo moved to her bedside, careful not to disturb any of the equipment. His large, calloused hand engulfed her small one. "I'm here, sweetheart." "The mean men hurt me," she said, her lower lip trembling. "Why were they mean?" Leo felt the words like physical blows. He couldn't answer, couldn't find words to explain why his past had reached out to hurt this innocent child. Emma stepped in, smoothing Lucy's hair back from the bandage. "Just rest now, baby," she murmured. "Everything's going to be okay." But Leo knew it wouldn't be okay. Not as long as his old life threatened his new one. He stood at the window, watching the city lights blur through unshed tears. Behind him, the steady beep of the heart monitor marked time like a countdown. Emma's hand touched his arm. "This isn't your fault," she whispered, but he could hear the fear in her voice. Leo turned to look at Lucy, now drifting off to sleep. His daughter. His responsibility. The guilt sat heavy in his chest, a physical weight pressing down on him. He'd brought this danger into their lives. He'd put that bandage on Lucy's head just as surely as if he'd pushed her himself. The choice he'd been avoiding now stood stark and clear before him. But watching Lucy's peaceful face, he wondered if any choice he made could truly keep her safe. The fluorescent lights of the hospital waiting room buzzed overhead, casting harsh shadows across Leo's face. He slumped in the uncomfortable plastic chair, his leather jacket creased and wrinkled from hours of worried waiting. The smell of coffee from a nearby vending machine mixed with antiseptic, making his stomach turn. A children's show played quietly on the mounted TV, its cheerful sounds a stark contrast to the heavy atmosphere. Leo stared at his hands, rough and calloused from years of working on motorcycles. These weren't the hands of a father. They were the hands of someone who brought danger wherever he went. Emma returned from the nurse's station, holding 2 paper cups of water. She handed one to Leo, then settled into the chair beside him. Her eyes were red-rimmed from crying, but her voice was steady. "The nurse says she's doing better. Her vitals are good." Leo nodded but couldn't meet her eyes. "I should never have come back into your lives," he said, his voice hoarse. "Look what I brought with me. All this danger, all this pain." "Leo," Emma said softly, "you didn't push her off that playground equipment. Those men did. Because of me." His voice cracked, and he lowered it quickly, aware of other worried families nearby. Because I was selfish enough to think I could just walk back into her life and everything would be fine. What kind of father puts his kid in danger like that? Emma was quiet for a moment, turning the paper cup in her hands. The kind who's trying to change, she finally said. The kind who shows up at the zoo and pushes her on the swings and makes her laugh. The kind who's sitting here right now beating himself up because he loves her so much it hurts. Leo's throat tightened. He remembered Lucy's face at the zoo, her eyes wide with wonder at the elephants, the way she'd slipped her tiny hand into his without hesitation, trusting him completely. And now she lay in a hospital bed because of his past. I don't know how to do this, he admitted, his voice barely above a whisper. I don't know how to be what she needs. None of us do, at first, Emma replied. We just keep trying, keep showing up, keep loving them even when it's hard, especially when it's hard. A nurse appeared in the doorway, clipboard in hand. Mr. Andrews? Miss Wells? Lucy's waking up and asking for you both. They stood together, Emma's hand briefly touching Leo's arm in silent support. The walk to Lucy's room felt like miles, each step heavy with the weight of responsibility and fear. Lucy lay small and pale against the white hospital sheets, her dark hair a stark contrast against the pillow. The bandage on her head seemed huge against her tiny face. As they entered, her eyes fluttered open, searching the room until they found Leo. Daddy? Her voice was weak but clear. Leo moved to her bedside, his heart breaking at how fragile she looked. Lucy's small hand reached out, searching for his. Without hesitation, he took it, marveling at how perfectly her tiny fingers fit in his palm. In that moment, looking down at his daughter's trusting face, something shifted inside him. The guilt was still there, the fear too, but alongside them grew something stronger. Determination. This little girl believed in him, reached for him even now. He couldn't let her down again. Lucy's fingers tightened around his, and Leo held on carefully, as if she might break. But she didn't break. She smiled, tired but real, and Leo felt his own eyes grow wet. The hospital room grew quiet as night settled in. The only sounds were the steady beeping of monitors and Lucy's soft breathing. Leo sat in the chair beside her bed, his large frame looking out of place among the cheerful drawings on the walls and the small stuffed animals Emma had brought from home. Through the window, city lights twinkled against the dark sky. Emma had gone home to get some rest, promising to return early in the morning. Leo couldn't bring himself to leave, even though his back ached from the uncomfortable chair. He watched Lucy's chest rise and fall, her small face peaceful in sleep. A nurse came in to check Lucy's vitals, moving quietly around the room. She smiled kindly at Leo, adjusting Lucy's blanket before leaving. The gesture reminded him of all the times he should have been there to tuck Lucy in, to check on her in the night, to chase away bad dreams. I've been running my whole life, he whispered to the sleeping child. From responsibility, from love, from anything real. He reached out, gently touching her small hand. But I'm done running, Lucy. I promise you that. The weight of his past seemed to press down on his shoulders. All those years wasted, chasing the wrong things, believing that freedom meant having no ties, no commitments. Now, looking at his daughter's face, he understood true freedom meant something entirely different. Lucy stirred in her sleep, her fingers curling around his thumb. The simple trust in that unconscious gesture made his heart ache. He thought about the gang, about their threats and demands. They were part of a life that had no place in his future anymore. Not with this precious life depending on him. I'm going to be better, he promised quietly. I'm going to be the father you deserve. No more looking back, no more old habits. His voice grew stronger with each word, even though he kept it low. "I'll learn how to be there for you, how to protect you the right way, not with fists or threats, but with love and wisdom." The night passed slowly. Leo dozed occasionally, but always jerked awake at the slightest sound from Lucy. Each time he opened his eyes, he reaffirmed his promise. With every hour that passed, his resolve grew stronger. As dawn began to paint the sky in soft pinks and golds, Lucy opened her eyes. She blinked at him sleepily, a small smile crossing her face. "You stayed," she said simply. "Of course I did, sweetheart," Leo replied, his voice rough with emotion. "I'll always stay now." Emma arrived shortly after, carrying fresh clothes for Lucy and coffee for Leo. She took one look at his face and seemed to understand something had changed. "Why don't you go home and get some real rest?" she suggested. "We'll be fine here." Leo stood, his joints protesting after the long night. He leaned down and kissed Lucy's forehead, careful of her bandages. "I'll be back soon," he promised. Walking through the hospital corridors toward the exit, Leo felt different. His shoulders were straight, his steps purposeful. The uncertainty and guilt that had plagued him were still there, but they no longer controlled him. In their place was something stronger: determination, hope, and the fierce love of a father. Outside, the morning sun warmed his face. He took a deep breath of fresh air, feeling more clear-headed than he had in years. The path ahead wouldn't be easy, but for the first time, he was ready to face it head-on. Leo stood in his small apartment, surrounded by cardboard boxes. The place had never felt like home, just somewhere to crash between rides. Now, looking at the sparse furnishings and bare walls, he realized how empty his life had been. He picked up a worn leather vest hanging in the closet, his fingers tracing over the patches and insignias. Each one told a story, marked a moment in a life he was leaving behind. With careful movements, he folded the vest and placed it in a box marked "Storage." "No looking back," he muttered to himself, taping the box shut. The morning sun streamed through the dusty windows as he sorted through his belongings. There wasn't much worth keeping: some clothes, a few books, and his tools. Everything else reminded him of his old life. Those things would go into storage, somewhere far from his new start. His phone buzzed. A text from Emma lit up the screen. "Found a nice place 2 blocks from us. Available next week if you're interested." Leo smiled, typing back a quick yes. The apartment she'd found was smaller than his current place, but being closer to Lucy made it perfect. He could walk her to school, be there for dinner, maybe even help with homework. The sound of motorcycles rumbling past his window made him pause. Once, that sound had been like a siren call. Now it just reminded him of everything he needed to leave behind. He'd already sold his bike. The money would help with the deposit on the new place. Loading boxes into his newly purchased used pickup truck, Leo caught his reflection in the rearview mirror. Same face, same tattoos, but something was different in his eyes. There was purpose there now, replacing the restless searching that had driven him for so long. The drive to his new neighborhood took only 20 minutes, but it felt like crossing into another world. Trees lined the streets, kids played in front yards, and neighbors waved to each other. It was everything his old life wasn't: stable, peaceful, normal. Leo parked outside the community center, taking a deep breath. Emma had mentioned they offered job training programs. With his mechanical skills, he could probably find work at a legitimate garage, maybe even open his own place someday. Inside, the center buzzed with activity. A bulletin board displayed various class schedules and job postings. Leo felt out of place among the mothers with strollers and elderly folks heading to exercise classes, but no one gave him a second glance. At the front desk, a friendly woman with gray hair handed him a stack of papers. The automotive certification program starts next month, she explained, pointing to the forms. We also have computer classes if you're interested. Leo looked down at the enrollment papers, remembering Lucy's words from the hospital. You stayed. This was another way of staying, putting down roots, building something real. He sat in a plastic chair, filling out the forms with careful concentration. Name, address, emergency contact. In the space for reason for enrollment, he wrote simply, "To build a better future for my daughter." When he finished, he handed the papers back to the woman at the desk. She smiled warmly as she processed his enrollment. "Welcome to the program, Mr. Andrews." Those simple words marked the beginning of his new life. There would be no more late-night rides with the gang, no more looking over his shoulder. Instead, there would be morning walks to school with Lucy, Sunday dinners, and honest work. Leo watched from the doorway as Lucy tied her shoes, her small fingers struggling with the laces. His first instinct was to rush forward and help, but Emma had taught him the importance of letting Lucy try things on her own. "You've almost got it, kiddo," he encouraged, catching Emma's approving glance from the kitchen. Lucy's face scrunched in concentration as she finally managed to form a somewhat lopsided bow. "I did it!" she exclaimed, beaming with pride. "That's my girl," Leo said softly, the words still feeling new on his tongue. Emma approached, carrying Lucy's lunchbox. "Remember what we talked about, Leo? She needs to be at school by 8:15. "Got it. No stops for ice cream this time," he promised, remembering last week's tardiness. Emma's stern look had taught him that being a fun dad wasn't always the same as being a good one. As they walked to school, Lucy's small hand in his weathered one, Leo marveled at how natural it was beginning to feel. She chatted about her friends and her favorite cartoon shows, and he found himself genuinely interested in every word. After dropping Lucy off, Leo spent the morning at the community center, learning basic computer skills. The afternoon found him grocery shopping, something he'd never imagined himself doing. He studied the recipe he'd found online, carefully selecting ingredients. Back at Emma's apartment, where she'd granted him limited access for Lucy's sake, Leo set up in the kitchen. Cooking had never been his strong suit, but YouTube tutorials had become his new best friend. He heard Emma's key in the lock just as he was pulling the lasagna from the oven. The timing wasn't perfect. He'd hoped to have everything ready before she got home from work, but the surprise in her eyes made up for it. "Leo?" Emma set her purse down, taking in the scene. The kitchen counter held a simple salad and garlic bread, and the table was set for 3. "I know it's not much," he said, suddenly feeling self-conscious, "but I wanted to do something normal, to show you I'm trying." Emma's expression softened. "It smells good," she admitted, hanging up her coat. "Where's Lucy?" "Mrs. Rodriguez next door is watching her for another hour. I thought, maybe we could talk, without having to watch every word we say?" Emma nodded slowly, accepting the glass of water he offered. The distance between them felt smaller somehow, filled with possibility rather than pain. "You're different," she observed, watching him serve the food. "The Leo I knew wouldn't have been caught dead wearing an apron." He chuckled, looking down at the flowered apron he'd borrowed from her kitchen. "The Leo you knew wasn't much of anything worth being." They sat down together, the conversation flowing easier than either expected. Leo told her about his classes, his plans for finding steady work. Emma shared stories about Lucy's early years, the first steps, first words, the moments he'd missed but could now appreciate. "I can't change the past," Leo said, pushing his plate aside. "But I'm learning to be better, not just for Lucy, but—" He met Emma's eyes. "For you too. Because you deserve a co-parent you can trust." Emma reached across the table, briefly touching his hand. "Keep going like this," she said quietly. "That's all I ask." The moment was interrupted by a knock at the door, Mrs. Rodriguez bringing Lucy home. But something had shifted between them, a foundation of trust slowly rebuilding, one small gesture at a time. The morning sun painted long shadows across the playground as Leo parked his motorcycle. He'd traded his leather jacket for a simple denim one, trying to look more like the other dads at the park. Lucy bounced excitedly next to him, her pink backpack filled with snacks and toys Emma had packed. "Can we go on the swings first?" Lucy tugged at his sleeve, her eyes bright with anticipation. "Sure thing, kiddo." Leo followed her lead, his heavy boots crunching on the gravel path. He watched as she scrambled onto the swing, her legs dangling. "Push me, Daddy! Higher!" The word "Daddy" still caught him off guard, making his heart skip a beat every time. Leo positioned himself behind her, giving gentle pushes. "Hold on tight now." He remembered Emma's words about being careful, about finding the balance between fun and safety. As the morning wore on, Leo found himself relaxing into the role of father. They built sandcastles together, his large hands looking comically oversized next to her tiny plastic shovel. Lucy taught him the proper way to construct a moat, her serious expression making him smile. "No, Daddy. The water goes here first," she instructed, pouring her water bottle carefully around their creation. During lunch, they sat on a checkered blanket Lucy had insisted on bringing. Leo watched in amazement as she meticulously arranged her sandwich triangles in a perfect circle. "Mom always cuts them like this," she explained, offering him half of her apple. "Your mom's pretty smart about these things," Leo said softly, accepting the fruit. They spotted clouds together, lying back on the blanket. Lucy's imagination transformed simple white puffs into elaborate stories about dragons and unicorns. Leo found himself getting caught up in her tales, pointing out cloud shapes he would have never noticed before. "That one looks like your motorcycle," Lucy declared, pointing skyward. "You think so?" Leo squinted. "Looks more like a horse to me." "No, see? There's the wheels, and that's where you sit." Her matter-of-fact tone made him laugh. In the afternoon, they discovered a family of ducks near the pond. Lucy named each one, creating an entire storyline about their duck family dynamics. Leo listened, amazed at how easily she could create worlds from nothing. "The baby duck misses his daddy sometimes," Lucy said suddenly, watching the smallest duckling paddle after its mother. "Like I did." Leo's throat tightened. He knelt beside her, his hand gentle on her shoulder. "I'm here now, Lucy. I'm not going anywhere." She turned and hugged him, her small arms barely reaching around his broad chest. "I know, Daddy." As the sun began to set, they sat on a bench sharing an ice cream cone. Lucy's face was sticky with vanilla, and Leo found himself automatically reaching for a napkin to clean her cheeks, the gesture feeling surprisingly natural. Looking at his daughter in the golden evening light, Leo felt something shift inside him. The peace he'd been searching for all his life was right here, in these simple moments. Not in the roar of motorcycles or the thrill of danger, but in watching his daughter lick ice cream from her fingers and hearing her giggle at the ducks. This was what being a father felt like. Not just the title or the responsibility, but the joy of it. The way Lucy trusted him completely, how she looked to him for protection and love. It wasn't the life he'd imagined for himself, but somehow it was better than anything he could have planned. Leo stood on Emma's front porch, his hand hovering over the doorbell. The evening air was cool, carrying the scent of blooming jasmine from her garden. He took a deep breath, steadying himself for what he needed to say. Emma opened the door before he could ring, a look of surprise crossing her face. Leo, is everything okay? Lucy's already asleep. I know. I came to talk to you, he said, his voice rough with emotion. Got a minute? She nodded, stepping aside to let him in. The living room was warm and inviting, toys scattered across the floor, evidence of Lucy's presence everywhere. Emma cleared a spot on the couch, gesturing for him to sit. Coffee? She offered, but Leo shook his head. Emma, I need to say something. He remained standing, his large frame seeming almost too big for the cozy room. These past few months, being with Lucy, seeing you again, it's changed everything. Emma sat quietly, her hands folded in her lap, waiting. I was wrong, Leo continued, his voice thick. Wrong to leave you back then. Wrong to not look for you when I cleaned up my act. Wrong to miss out on Lucy's first steps, her first words. He ran a hand through his graying hair. I've been trying to make up for lost time, but I never properly faced what I did. Emma's expression softened. Leo, please let me finish. He paced slowly, choosing his words carefully. That life I lived, the gang, the chaos, I thought it was freedom, but it was just running away, running from responsibility, from love, from everything real. He stopped, turning to face her. I ran from you because what we had scared me. It was too real, too good, and when I finally got my head straight, I figured too much time had passed. Tears welled in Emma's eyes, but she blinked them back. We all make mistakes, Leo. This is more than just a mistake. He moved closer, kneeling in front of her chair. I want you to know that I'm here now, completely. Not just for Lucy, but for you too. Whatever that means, whatever you'll allow it to mean, I'm done running. His hands, rough from years of working on motorcycles, gently took hers. I know I can't take back those years. Can't give you back all those sleepless nights with a crying baby, or the birthdays I missed. But I'm promising you now, Emma, I'm all in. No more looking back, no more old life trying to pull me away. You and Lucy are my life now. Emma's tears fell freely now. She squeezed his hands, her voice barely a whisper. I forgive you, Leo. I think I started forgiving you the moment I saw how you looked at Lucy that first day in the park. Relief washed over Leo's features, and his shoulders relaxed. Emma reached out, touching his cheek gently. The simple gesture carried years of unspoken words, of pain and hope and possibility. They sat in comfortable silence, the ticking of the clock on the wall marking this moment of peace. Through the window, the stars were beginning to appear in the darkening sky. Everything had changed, yet somehow they had found their way back to where they were always meant to be. Emma wiped her eyes, a soft smile playing on her lips. We've come a long way, haven't we? Leo nodded, his own eyes misty. We have, and I'm not going anywhere this time. Emma paced back and forth in her small kitchen, clutching a wrinkled letter in her hands. Leo sat at the wooden table, watching her with patient eyes. The morning sunlight streamed through the window, casting warm patches on the worn linoleum floor. I just don't know what to do, Emma said, stopping to lean against the counter. The job offer in Denver, it's amazing. Better pay, better schools for Lucy. She looked at Leo, her eyes troubled. But it would mean moving away, starting fresh somewhere else. Leo nodded slowly, his weathered hands wrapped around a coffee mug. The old Leo would have reacted with anger or tried to control the situation. But he wasn't that man anymore. Tell me more about the position, he said quietly. Emma sat down across from him, spreading the letter on the table. It's a management role at a children's hospital. Everything I've worked toward. She pushed her hair behind her ear, a nervous habit Leo remembered from years ago. But Lucy's whole life is here. her friends, her school. She paused, looking at him. And now you're here too. Leo took a thoughtful sip of his coffee. Lucy's tough, like her mama. She'd adjust. He met Emma's gaze. And as for me, well, I could find work anywhere. Mechanics are always needed. Emma's eyes widened. What are you saying? I'm saying that if you want to take this job, I'll support you. If that means following you to Denver to stay close to Lucy, that's what I'll do. He reached across the table, his calloused hand covering hers. I missed too many years already. I'm not missing anymore. Tears welled in Emma's eyes. You'd do that? Just pick up and move? In a heartbeat, Leo said, his voice firm. Emma, I meant what I said about being all in. This isn't just about making up for lost time anymore. It's about being there for our daughter's future. He squeezed her hand gently. And maybe for yours too, if you'll let me. Emma wiped her eyes with her free hand, looking at the man before her. The hard edges were still there, but they'd softened. The restless energy that had always seemed to drive him was replaced by something steadier, more grounded. When did you get so wise? She asked, managing a small smile. Leo chuckled. Probably around the time I realized what really matters. He released her hand and stood up, moving to the coffee pot. As he poured them both fresh cups, he continued, Take the job if it's what you want. Lucy and I will be right there with you. Or stay here if that feels right. Either way, you've got my support. Emma watched him. This man who had once torn her world apart and was now helping to rebuild it. The patience in his voice, the gentle way he approached her decision. It was so different from the impulsive, aggressive Leo she'd known before. Thank you, she said softly, for making this easier. Leo set the fresh coffee in front of her and sat back down. Their eyes met across the table, and in that moment, Emma saw all the changes in him, the growth, the stability, the dedication. She saw the man she'd always hoped he could become. The morning light grew stronger, filling the kitchen with warmth. They sat together in comfortable silence, sharing this quiet moment of understanding. Something had shifted between them, something profound and lasting. The trust they'd been carefully rebuilding had finally found solid ground. The afternoon sun warmed Leo's face as he sat on the familiar park bench, the same one where his wallet had fallen months ago. The memory made him smile. That small moment had changed everything. Lucy was playing on the jungle gym with 3 other kids her age. Her laughter carried across the playground, pure and bright. She wore her favorite blue dress with little white flowers, her dark hair bouncing in pigtails as she climbed and swung. Leo watched her with pride, remembering how far they'd come. The first few visits had been awkward, filled with uncertain silences and hesitant conversations. Now, Lucy's eyes lit up whenever she saw him. She'd grab his hand without hesitation, pulling him along to show him her latest discovery or tell him about her day at school. A light breeze rustled the leaves overhead. Leo adjusted his leather jacket, the same one he'd worn for years, but somehow it felt different now. Softer, like him. The tattoos on his arms were still there, telling stories of his past, but they too seemed to have changed meaning. They were reminders of how far he'd come, not chains holding him back. 2 mothers sat on a nearby bench, chatting while watching their children. They didn't eye him suspiciously anymore, like they had in the beginning. They'd seen him here enough times now, always gentle with Lucy, always patient. Sometimes they even smiled and waved. Lucy was showing her new friends how to do a cartwheel. She'd been practicing all week, determined to master it. Her face scrunched up in concentration as she tried again and again. Leo felt his chest tighten with emotion. She had his determination, but thankfully, she had Emma's grace. "Watch me," Lucy called out, attempting another wobbly cartwheel. Leo gave her a thumbs up, and she beamed with pride. The playground was filling up as more families arrived. Leo observed the other fathers playing with their children, pushing them on swings, catching them at the bottom of slides, teaching them to climb monkey bars. Once, he would have felt like an imposter among them. Now he knew he belonged. Lucy's friend Sarah fell and scraped her knee. Before Leo could move, Lucy was already there, helping her up and brushing off her clothes. She had such a kind heart, just like her mother. Leo watched as she walked Sarah to her mom, making sure she was okay before returning to play. The sun dipped lower in the sky, casting long shadows across the park. Other families began packing up, heading home for dinner. Lucy's friends waved goodbye one by one until she was the last child on the playground. She made one final attempt at a cartwheel, and this time her feet went over perfectly. She landed upright, eyes wide with surprise and joy. Unable to contain her excitement, she sprinted toward Leo, her pigtails flying behind her. "Did you see that, Daddy? Did you see my cartwheel?" Leo's heart stopped for a moment. Then it swelled so full he thought it might burst. She'd called him Daddy. Not Leo, not Mr. Andrews, but Daddy. The word he'd dreamed of hearing but hadn't dared to hope for. Tears pricked at his eyes as Lucy threw herself into his arms, still bubbling with excitement about her achievement. He held her close, this precious girl who had given him a second chance at life, at love, at being the man he was meant to be. "I saw it, sweetheart," he managed to say, his voice thick with emotion. "You did amazing." The early morning air was crisp and clean as Leo stood on the small balcony of his new apartment. Pink and orange streaks painted the sky, promising another beautiful day. He wrapped his hands around a steaming cup of coffee, breathing in its rich aroma. The sun peeked over the horizon, warming his weathered face. His new place wasn't fancy, but it was honest. A small two-bedroom unit just 3 blocks from Emma and Lucy's home. The walls were freshly painted, and though the furniture was sparse, it felt more like home than anywhere he'd lived in the past 20 years. Leo glanced down at his hands. The calluses told stories of his past life, motorcycle repairs, bar fights, and hard living. But now those same hands helped Lucy with her homework, fixed her bicycle chain, and tucked her in at night. They were becoming gentler, like him. The morning traffic hummed below, people heading to work and school. He thought about his own job at the local auto repair shop. It wasn't glamorous, but it was steady work that let him use his skills honestly. His boss, Mike, had taken a chance on him despite his background, and Leo made sure that trust wasn't misplaced. A family of birds swooped past his balcony, their wings catching the golden light. Leo smiled, remembering how Lucy loved watching birds. She could name several species now, thanks to a book Emma had given her. The thought of his daughter made his heart swell with pride. She was so smart, so full of life and curiosity. The sunrise had always been a lonely time for Leo in the past. Hours spent on endless highways, running from something he couldn't name. But now, standing here in the quiet morning light, he felt at peace. The restlessness that had driven him for so long had settled into something stronger. Purpose. His phone buzzed in his pocket. It was a text from Emma. "Pancakes at our place? Lucy's asking for you." Leo's smile widened. He typed back a quick, "On my way," and went inside to get ready. He changed into a clean shirt, ran a comb through his hair, and grabbed his keys. The morning routine felt natural now, comfortable in a way he never expected. The walk to Emma's apartment was pleasant in the early morning light. Neighbors waved as he passed. They knew him now not as the intimidating biker, but as Lucy's dad. The transformation still amazed him sometimes. He could smell the pancakes before he even knocked on Emma's door. sweet and warm, mixed with the sound of Lucy's giggles from inside. When Emma opened the door, her smile was genuine. She wore an apron dusted with flour, her hair tied back in a casual ponytail. "Daddy!" Lucy's voice rang out as she ran to greet him. She wrapped her arms around his waist, and he lifted her up, spinning her around once before setting her back down. Her pajamas had little stars on them, and her hair was still messy from sleep. "Just in time," Emma said, gesturing toward the kitchen. "Lucy insisted we couldn't start without you." The kitchen table was set for 3, morning sunlight streaming through the window. A stack of golden pancakes sat in the center, steam rising invitingly. Lucy's favorite maple syrup waited nearby, along with fresh strawberries and whipped cream. It was such a simple scene, breakfast with his family. But to Leo, it meant everything. He caught Emma's eye across the kitchen and saw his own gratitude reflected there. They had all come so far, healing old wounds and building something new together. Leo and Emma sat on the worn wooden steps of her front porch, their shoulders barely touching. The late afternoon sun cast long shadows across the small yard where Lucy chased Bubbles, her delighted giggles filling the air. She twirled and jumped, her pink dress swirling around her like flower petals in the wind. "She's got so much energy," Leo said softly, shaking his head in wonder. "Never stops moving." Emma smiled, tucking a strand of hair behind her ear. "Gets that from you, I think. I was always the quiet one." "I don't know about that," Leo chuckled. "I remember you being pretty feisty back then." They sat in comfortable silence for a moment, watching Lucy try to catch the biggest bubble she could find. The gentle breeze carried the sweet scent of Emma's flowering jasmine vine that climbed the porch trellis. "You know," Emma said, her voice thoughtful, "I never thought we'd be sitting here like this. After you left." She paused, choosing her words carefully. "I was so angry for such a long time." Leo's shoulders tensed slightly. "I was lost back then. Didn't know how to be anything except what I'd always been." He watched Lucy spin in circles, arms outstretched. But seeing her that day in the park, it changed everything. Emma nodded, her eyes soft. "It wasn't easy for me to trust you again, to let you into her life, into our lives." "I know," Leo said. He rubbed his palms against his jeans, a nervous habit he'd never quite shaken. "Every day, I wake up grateful that you gave me that chance." Lucy ran over to them, her cheeks flushed with excitement. "Daddy, look!" She held up a dandelion gone to seed. "Make a wish." She thrust the fluffy white seed head toward him. Leo took it carefully, treating it like something precious. "What should I wish for, Princess?" Lucy put her hands on her hips, looking so much like Emma that it made his heart ache. "You can't tell, then it won't come true." Emma laughed, the sound warm and genuine. "She's right, you know. Those are the rules." Leo closed his eyes and blew gently, sending the seeds floating into the evening air. Lucy clapped her hands and ran after them, trying to catch the floating wishes. "I've been thinking," Emma said, watching their daughter dance through the yard. "Maybe we could start having Sunday dinners together, all of us. Make it a regular thing." Leo turned to look at her, surprise and hope mixing in his chest. "Yeah?" "Yeah," Emma smiled. "Lucy would love it, and—" She hesitated, then continued, "I think I would too." The setting sun painted everything in soft golden light. Lucy had found another dandelion and was carefully selecting her wish. Her small face was screwed up in concentration, taking the matter very seriously. "I'd like that," Leo said quietly. "More than you know." Emma's hand found his, squeezing gently. It wasn't a grand gesture or a dramatic moment, but it felt significant. like another small step forward on this path they were building together. "We'll take it one day at a time," Emma said, echoing the words they'd both come to live by. "That's all any of us can do." Lucy's voice called out to them. "Mommy! Daddy! Come look what I found!" They stood together, their hands still linked, and walked down the porch steps to join their daughter in the yard. The evening air was sweet with possibility, and Leo felt that deep sense of peace that only comes from being exactly where you're meant to be. I hope you like this story. Please share what's your favorite part of the story and where in the world you are watching from. Have a wonderful day.